Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. For those of you whom I haven't met, I'm Lloyd Minor, Dean of Medicine at Stanford, and it's my privilege and honor to welcome this afternoon Dr. Freeman Hrabowski. Dr. Hrabowski is the president of University of Maryland, Baltimore County, a position he's held since 1992. With Dr. Hrabowski's leadership, UMBC has gone to stellar heights as a leading higher education institution in America. I know that Freeman's going to tell us about the exciting things that are going on at UMBC during his talk, so I'd just like to share with you a little bit about Freeman's background and my friendship with Freeman. Freeman was born in Birmingham, Alabama. He joined the civil rights movement, participated in the civil rights movement in Birmingham at the age of 12. Along with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others in Birmingham, he was arrested for his participation in peaceful, nonviolent protests against the pernicious effects of segregation in the South. Many people might have been deterred or discouraged from that experience, but I think it further increased Freeman's resolve to have an impact in the world. He went on to get his PhD in mathematics from University of Illinois and to build a distinguished career as a mathematician and an educator prior to his career in leadership. Appropriately, Freeman has received many, many honors, including no fewer than 20 honorary degrees from institutions such as Harvard, Duke, Johns Hopkins, and many, many others. I want to say that personally, I have found Freeman to be an enormous source of inspiration, of advice, and of wisdom in my leadership career. He is a seasoned, experienced, and exceedingly wise leader who measures his leadership by the lives that he impacts and by the programs that he and his colleagues have built at UMBC and at so many other institutions around the world. It's a true privilege and honor to welcome Freeman Hrabowski to the Dean's Lecture today. Freeman.
Thank you, Lord, very much. Thank you. William Carlos Williams once said that it's difficult to find news in poetry, and yet men die miserably every day because of a lack of what is found there. And so I begin with words from our beloved Maya Angelou. It was Professor Sibley who showed me a picture that reminded me as I looked at Levi Watkins, Professor Levi Watkins, and saw and thought about his friend, Maya Angelou. And so, Dean, I'm beginning with those words, Dean Minor. Lift up your eyes upon this day breaking for you. Give birth again to the dream. Women, children, men. Take it, this dream, into the palms of your hands. Mold it into the image of your most public self. Sculpt it into the shape of your most private need. Here on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes and into your brother's face and say simply, very simply with hope, good morning. Good afternoon, Stanford Medicine. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Give her a hand for poetry, please. Thank you. We need poetry in our lives now more than ever, in medicine, in science. Your dean and I are both sons of the South. And we were talking earlier about some of our experiences. My new book on Holding Fast to Dreams, Empowering Youth from the Civil Rights Movement to STEM Achievement, talks about my being in the back of the church in the middle of the week, not wanting to be there with my parents insisting that I listen to this guy who's from out of town talk about his plans for changing things, and they're bribing me with the two things I like most, math. I always got goosebumps doing math, still do. I'm not ashamed to say it. And eating, I was eating these M&Ms, the good kind with the peanuts. And the guy says, if you convince the children to participate in this march, all of America will understand that even our babies know the difference between right and wrong, and they can go to better schools. And I wanted to stop using those hand-me-down books. And I really did want to get away from those. I was telling the students this morning, it was awful having to use those hand-me-down books. And I was at lunch with the dean, and I remembered from years ago his telling me a story I will never forget about his being involved in integration in another southern town in Arkansas in 1971. And it's a story that grabbed me because he got to the school as a white boy, to Dunbar High School, the school for colored children. And he recognized first that, surprisingly, there were fewer books in the school. And then he saw that the books were so old that the rats had eaten the pages out of the books, if you can imagine. And he remembers that experience. And what am I saying? Inequality. That sometimes in a society as rich as ours, we can have two groups, those who have experiences where they get the resources and those where they don't. And here's my essential point to you at one of the finest institutions in the world. Of those to whom much is given, much is required. You are a wonderful institution. You take great pride in being the best, as you should. You're the best academically. In a society that is changing dramatically, and it is appropriate that your dean and colleagues here are having this series that focuses on what I would call inclusiveness, the notion, how do we bring more people from diverse backgrounds into mainstream society so that we can see more people from all backgrounds, all racial and ethnic backgrounds, men and women, people with a variety of challenges, people of color, people from different backgrounds, LGBTQ, people with disabilities. How do we make sure that anyone has the opportunity to excel in the faculty, in students, in medicine, in science, and other areas? That is the question. How do we make sure that one day when I go around and see, I told your dean, the wall with all the endowed professorships, that I can see somebody looking like me? Did you get that? Okay. I said, Dean, when I was at the National Academy of Sciences, and there was a meeting of members of the National Academy of Sciences and the Howard Hughes investigators, and I said, this was several years ago, I will know we've made progress in our country when the intersection of these two groups in my race is no longer the null set. It's slightly more than that now, but not much. Get it? And so this is what I want to focus on today. What are the strategies we need to use as we think about increasing the numbers of people who are becoming physicians, MD, PhDs in these disciplines, and not only for the professions, but for the faculty positions, for the leaders, as we think about, for example, health disparities in our country. We already know the numbers. I don't need to go through that. We know that people from certain backgrounds are sicker or dying. We know all those things. I don't need to talk about the problems. I would talk about my own research. It focuses on how do we go about increasing substantially the number of people excelling at such a level that they have opportunities to be prepared to come to a Stanford, to go to med school, to go into PhD programs, to go into MD PhD programs. I come from a campus that has students from 150 countries. And we talk about both domestic diversity and international diversity. We have African American students, Latino students, students of Asian background. We have Native Americans. We're very proud of the fact that we lead the country among predominantly white universities in sending African Americans on to MD PhDs. Give my colleagues a hand for that. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. I'm also very proud to say it's a campus where I can tell you with great certainty that the basketball team reads well and they get great jobs. Give me a big hand for that, too. And we were Final Four in both chess, game development, and in soccer last year. Give me a big hand for that, too. Thank you. But most important, it is a campus where faculty, along with staff, but faculty, believe strongly in their role in helping students of all races, young men and women, to excel in disciplines in general, and especially in the disciplines where America has not shown its belief in students of color, and that's science and engineering. When we look at the statistics, what we know is that not one national agency can tell me that even 1% of the scientists are black, and only about 3% of the scientists at NIH are Hispanic. I'm privileged to chair the Obama Commission on African Americans and Educational Excellence, and so I get all the data. I work with all the agencies. And let me just give you one comment that you'll appreciate. When I'm talking to the institutes at NIH, I talk about success of students, or the lack thereof, in STEM. Scientists will often complain that the public doesn't seem to support Congress in its work to invest in basic research. We know we of course need Congress to invest in basic research and applied research, and of course in all the medical areas. However, if people don't feel good about the way they were treated in science, why should we expect the public to fight for investments in science? Now let me just give you one piece of evidence of the problem we face, and I'll ask you the question. I will tell you, I chaired the National Academies Committee on expanding participation in STEM in America. And so it didn't surprise people from Harvard and MIT to Howard University to Miami-Dade Community College to the U-Texas campuses to institutions here in California that only 20% of blacks and Hispanics who begin with a major in science or engineering actually graduate with a major in science and engineering. But let me ask you, what percent of whites do you think who begin with a major in science or engineering actually graduate with a bachelor's in science or engineering? What do you think? I heard 60%. Anybody else? 35. Anybody else? 70, 40. Anybody else? Over 80. It's only 32%. Somebody was good. Good guess. She says, all right. And she knows how to say she's the winner, all right? All right. What percent of Asians, Asian Americans, what would you say? 70. Anybody else? 80. 50. Anybody else? 40. 41%. Okay. Now, the first response from the professor, these were all professors on the committee. We looked at the data, 41%. The first response was, it's a K through 12 problem. First thing people said. From research universities to community colleges, it's a K through 12 problem. Because you see, in America, professional schools blame, and grad schools blame undergrad schools, who blame high schools, who blame middle schools, who blame elementary schools, who blame the families, and the father blames the mother side of the family. Right? We always blame somebody, right? But when we looked at the data, what we found, quite frankly, was, yeah, we need to strengthen K through 12. And one of the recommendations of that study, if you look at it, it's called Expanding Participation in STEM Workforce, America's STEM Workforce at the Crossroads. If you look at it, it's a National Academy of Sciences study. I was the chair. We do say we have to strengthen K through 12 education. We need to strengthen what we do to support teachers. No doubt, we need to do all of that. But we finally came up with something that upset some people, and others said, yeah, you're right. What we said was this: big part of the problem is us in the academy, at universities, and that the number one area for low-hanging fruit, and this is what I want med schools to hear, the med school to hear, is the undergraduate experience. That there are large numbers of undergraduates who had a solid education in undergrad school, in high school, get to college, and they get wiped out of science in the first year or two. Now here is the stunning finding. Based on evidence, the higher the test scores, SAT, ACT, AP, the higher the grades from high school. And this is the cutting part, folks. You ready for this? The more prestigious the university, listen carefully, the greater the probability the student will leave science or engineering within the first year or two. I'll say it one more time. The more likely, if the student has 5s, and I was very involved in the writing of AP, A, B, and BC calculus, for example, perfect SATs, okay. Prestigious universities start off majoring in pre-med, they become great lawyers all the time. I said that a couple of national agencies with people who started off to be like Dr. Minor, and lawyers raised their hand and said, that's me, okay? They said they started off, right, got a C in chemistry, went home and said, I love something in the humanities, okay? Because if you've been the valedictorian at your school, and you went off and everybody was rah-rah for you to go to some big place, right? And you're gonna come back to be the doctor, right? And it didn't work out. You got all A's except for the C in chemistry. You're not going back to say, I bummed out in chemistry. And for all my colleagues in the room who are in STEM, and I can say this as a mathematician, we know that the humanities people are a little more warm and fuzzy than we are. Come on, be honest about it, come on. We're focused on the problem. I'm focused on that math problem, right? You know, the writing instructor is gonna be a little more supportive that way. Not all, but some. But here's the other part. I was talking to a group of presidents in a Midwestern state. I said this. Some of the folks got a little upset, but a brilliant Shakespeare scholar said, you know, let's be honest. I started off in double E, I ended up in single E. She started off in electrical engineering, she ended up professor of English. She said it happens all the time. The secret in America is that high achieving students don't want to tell you that though, right? So if you get a chance, look at my TED Talk. It's about changing the culture of science. I teach presidents in a seminar at Harvard on leadership. And the question I get asked most frequently is, how do we convince people that high quality science doesn't mean most people don't make it? You see, we call first year science weed out courses. The National Science Foundation. We accept the idea that most people don't make it. I worked with a group of the best institutions in the country when thinking about the most nurturing science. I mean, quite frankly, one might argue the best place to go if you want to be really, to be successful in science, it will be a liberal arts college, the best of liberal arts colleges. What's my proof? Look at the disproportionately large number of graduates of the best liberal arts colleges who become members of the National Academy of Sciences. From David Baltimore to Tom Check, they went to liberal arts colleges. What made the difference? The very close relationship between the professors and the students, and the professors who were doing research. Now, I want to congratulate Stanford because I'm told there's very strong emphasis on teaching and learning here. But what I would ask you is, to what extent, at the undergrad level through, is there an emphasis, as we have at UMBC, on analytics to look and see what the performance is and what percent of students by race, by gender, are students actually succeeding, particularly in the first level courses? What is the probability that students by race, by gender, from different kinds of backgrounds, who start off in engineering, who start off in science, that they will actually succeed and go on to grad school? I'm very proud that 40% of our students of all races actually do graduate and go on to grad school. But we can tell you for each group whether or not they succeed. And so in the TED Talk, I talk about the 4 pillars of success in science: high expectations, group work, collaboration, as you might expect, right? It takes faculty to produce faculty. Any effort that's going to work in terms of success will require faculty embracing the work. It makes all the difference in the world. And the final one is building community among the students. It is still the case in America that STEM is likely to be cutthroat. What do I mean by that? If you're grading on the curve, it means I'm not going to help you, because if I help you and I tell you everything I know and you don't tell me everything you know, we have a problem. So what I want you to think about, because I want to have a lot of time for questions, is the question is, who are you, Stanford? And who do you want to be in a society that's almost half of color? You may be the best in the research, and you are. You may be the best in having the highest of standards. But in a world that's becoming increasingly unequal, where the Ford Foundation just announced this week that it's spending all of its money, $500 million a year, on inequality, when we know that we should be producing leaders who can help people from all kinds of backgrounds, where are we in Stanford medicine in understanding it's not enough to know the basis in science, but that we must understand the challenges of humankind? And when people look back on Stanford medicine 100 years from now, who will they say you are? The problems we face are more difficult than ever, and the challenge is to keep learning and struggling with the issues. My students are having fun as my wife and I are learning French right now. We're doing something different, interesting and different. And so, Jacqueline, ma femme Jacqueline et moi, nous étudions le français maintenant. Oui, oui. A year ago, my students said, Doc, don't you think you're a little old to be learning a language? I said, bring it on, right? And I mean, I can read some German. It's so interesting, and because I'm going to learn Spanish, but I'm doing some things with some African-speaking countries, and they're French-speaking, some French-speaking countries in Africa. And here's the point. It is so great to know that the human spirit, we have this ability to keep struggling and learning. And so I'm going to quote a line from the French poet Apollinaire. And the line says this as I close: La joie venait toujours après la peine. La joie, right? Venait toujours après la peine. It means this: the joy comes after the struggle. It's not about who's smart. I don't know what smart means. You're at Stanford, your best, Carol Dweck. It's about mindset. It's about mindset. It's about on my campus, the Chesapeake Retriever is our mascot, and his name is True Grit. That's what I want to leave you with, True Grit. UMBC is the house of grit. I want you to think about what it means to have grit, perseverance, resilience. You never give up. We've got some hard problems, and to be the best is about struggling with these issues about poverty and about our prejudices and about our assumptions and about the fact that you've got kids on this campus who may feel very ordinary or who may feel like, wow, what's my place here? I'm going to challenge you. If you're comfortable here, to say who's not comfortable here in America or at Stanford, this place that's so wonderful. Yeah, it's wonderful for you. But what about the kid who doesn't feel that comfort? How can you get out of yourself in order to get into that person and to say, we are here for you? There is what it means to be the best. La joie venait toujours après la peine. Thank you all very much. Let's take questions. Hey, hi. Yeah. A question for me? Thank you. Thank you. All right. Oh, thank you. Question, please. A wonderful, intimate audience. Yes.
What advice do you have for the University of Missouri?
It's a great question. And I was telling the students this morning, we had a great conversation this morning. I have been not sleeping thinking about, Missouri is almost a metaphor for America right now. Let us not think it's about Missouri. It's about all of us. It's about all of us in so many ways. And And I've had conversations with my students and with my colleagues. We are a campus. First of all, UMBC is an interesting experiment, really reflecting this country in that we were founded in 1963, right at the time that I went to jail for that week. And it was right after that that the higher education, if you get a chance, there's a piece in the online time right now that I wrote on the Higher Education Act. You may not know it, but in the mid-60s, right now, 50 years ago, the Higher Education Act was founded. And when it was founded, only 10% of Americans had gone to college. Most people don't know that. Only 10%. Today, we're up to 30%. About 37% of whites, almost 20% of blacks, but still only 14% of the fastest growing group in our country, Latinos, Hispanics. Maybe half of Asian Americans, well, only certain groups of Asian Americans, and a small percentage of Native Americans. Now, why am I saying all that? So it's been an experiment. But what we haven't figured out, while we've had those going to college, we still haven't figured out how to get people to connect. They may all be in the same institution, but we're not getting to know each other well. Just a few people here and there, right? So we still have a long way to go. Now, with that said, I used a quote with my students and with the faculty that shocked everybody on purpose. I said something that was about to upset people. I said, "I am the wisest man I know." And they looked at me, except for the philosophers. They smiled. The philosophers knew where I'm going. I said, "I am the wisest man I know." I said, "If I know anything, it is that I know nothing. The unexamined life is not worth living." I was quoting Socrates. You see? And why am I saying that? I am saying that because we are not examining ourselves. And we're not examining, helping our students examine the experience. Where am I going with this? As I said to some of my friends and others in Missouri, stop celebrating. There's nothing to celebrate. No, no, no. Because all you've done, you got some young people thinking, "Oh, we won." You didn't want a thing. No, no. First of all, not changed one person's heart. Those people who said whatever probably feel more strongly now than ever in that bad way towards young people. They feel more, they may not say it, but they're feeling it. And they're going to be more that bias, prejudice, racist, whatever. It's awful, just awful. I've got them on my case. If you're coming from an homogenous environment and you've been taught all kinds of prejudices all your life, you need a lot of support and help to get beyond that. You are a human being who needs help, a lot of help. You're a human being. If that's all you've been taught, you got to be helped. And education should be bringing it out so we can talk about it, right? But if you're just suppressing it, but you still hate, got to deal with that somehow, okay? As a president who coaches presidents, somebody should have been coaching that president. You get my point? So they played checkers rather than chess. We in America think that if you fire somebody, you've solved the problem. That ain't done a thing. But just made people split like this. It did not deal with the issues at all. It was a simple solution that did nothing except people celebrating that. Now, what have they done? You're just going to have two people on different sides. Some people are going to be scared to say what they really think. More segregation than ever. And it did not begin to solve the problem. What they needed to do was to bring people together and have the uncomfortable, robust conversations, not one or two, but ongoing over and over and over again, in and out of the classrooms, in the curriculum, to rethink its institutional transformation that we have to talk about in our country, in the universities and beyond. This is what we're working on my campus, and it's not easy. It is a struggle. It's embracing that struggle. They didn't begin. It's like when I was in South Africa, I worked in South Africa, and it was so interesting after they got their freedom, as they would call it, and they were celebrating for a month. And I was on the phone with people, and I said, well, I just have one ineluctable question. After the celebration, what? What now? Y'all all happy. What? what do you have? You see what I'm saying? I mean, it was just, so what I'm saying is this. We have to find ways of helping our students, but also faculty, to help think about ways of having these conversations, these uncomfortable conversations, so that faculty can understand what students are feeling. Because you can feel, I was back at my alma mater at Illinois, and saying how uncomfortable my new wife and I felt 40 years ago at Urbana-Champaign as the only black kids. And when I was a grad student there, I mean, and how I was helping undergrads, and then how I'd been there just recently and how the kids were talking, I said, it hadn't changed much. They all segregated over here and you here. Hadn't changed. You all aren't talking about these things. It was good, you know, because people meant well. They were good people. They needed more conversation. You get my point? Wonderful people, and they're working on it, but that's what we need on every campus, at every level. And I say it not from a pedestal, because I'm working on it on my campus. You got pockets where it goes well, other pockets where it doesn't. That's a long answer. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you. And I'd like to focus in on the issue of increasing the diversity of those we train as physicians.
Yes.
And I've done research here at Stanford and at Berkeley in terms of what happens to the incoming freshmen who think they're pre-med, and it absolutely corroborates what you say. Yeah. But it also got me back to 1893, Johns Hopkins University in the founding, when Daniel Coit Gilman, in the founding of Johns Hopkins, A, set up the pre-medical requirements of the sciences as silos, and yes. B, explicitly said, we're going to use these sciences. He didn't say weed out. He said to prune and graft. We'll only prune the strong ones, and the yes. weak ones we'll throw on the compost. We're going to use the sciences to separate the weak from the strong early on. Yeah. That's the paradigm that was set in 1893. And as you know, and I know, I'm advising, it is still, in many areas, the paradigm. So my question is, are we at a time when we can move beyond that paradigm? And how do we, A, envision, and B, teach science yes. as something that is not in the silos? And then how can we get the medical schools to, as Stanford has done, to drop the check this box for chemistry courses, this box for biology courses? In other words,
it's an excellent question. I have an answer. First of all, I want you to look at my two things. I said this earlier. The UMBC CDC. It's not the Center for Disease Control. It's the Chemistry Discovery Center. We've done a lot with course redesign. And we started with the Chemistry Discovery Center in first-year chemistry, then organic chemistry, then redesigning courses across the sciences, and then across humanities and social sciences. We're very good in areas well beyond science and engineering. I like saying that, I mean, we've been to the American College Theater Festival, for example, 8 times in the past 25 years, which means we actually go to the Kennedy Center, having one in theater. We do the kind of theater that either depresses you or pisses you off, all right? We do Beckett, all right? We do dog theater. But the fact is that we've gone to more collaborative group work, use of technology. We don't give people the theories. They have to figure out the theories using problems out of our biotech companies on campus. We have 100 companies on campus, started by our faculty, Hopkins faculty sometimes. But we've given faculty over the last 10 years a lot of opportunities to work on professional development in the teaching and learning process. So some of what I've heard you've been doing here in terms of thinking through the teaching and learning process, we do a lot of professional development support for faculty to think. We've gotten away from lecturing in the courses. First of all, because people are bored. Really bored. Secondly, we know they don't concentrate if you lecture for more than 8 to 10 minutes. Third, technology can make such a difference. But fourth, active learning means they really are required to be with you. in it, and they take response. So it's flipping your hybrid approaches really makes such a, and we do a lot with everything from Blackboard to, it really does have them, and we see the results are much better, much better. And it's constant experimentation. We give a lot of money for competitive approaches to interdisciplinarity. And most recently, we've had big grants from Howard Hughes for redesigning other beginning science courses, working with several institutions in biology, chemistry, and physics to prepare students for pre-med. So, for example, we worked with 2 other institutions, biology, chemistry, and physics, and ours was doing the computational biology piece. So we're not, I mean, and it is very different, and this is developing not only the course, but the materials that will be used by other institutions who are doing biology for pre-med majors. And it is heavily computational focused, and it is very different. And that includes the calculus. So that the calculus-based work has biological pre-med examples, so that the computational work really includes giving them minimal technology skills from the beginning. That also means teaching the biology faculty more skills. So it really is different. And that means several things. Giving faculty support to learn more stuff. And then the really nice thing for our campus, because I've worked to have a great partner, besides our Howard Hughes investigator, who does AIDS research, we have a great partnership with the undergrad education part of Howard Hughes, and so much so that they have built the life sciences undergrad lab of the 21st century on our campus. And so the agreement is we can use it during the year, and then they bring campuses during the summertime to look at how we can use it. And it really is very different. It has much more flexibility, much more technology, movable stuff. It looks like kindergarten. It really does. I mean, the colors, pink, blue, for the creativity piece, I mean, it really does look like kindergarten in a nice way. It really does. I mean, blue, pink, everything, all the chords and everything, it's fun. Next question, please. Somebody. I see somebody.
Who are some of the people that you look to or think about for inspiration or guidance as you continue to innovate and do the things that you're talking about?
Great question. You know, for years I did a lot with the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I was back and forth. They stole 2 of my best people back in when they first started. You know, some of you know when they started, I've forgotten when it was a long time ago now, but they had $2 billion. Remember, they had $2 billion to start that university? And this is what I was during my first, it was during my early years of my presidency. But what fascinated me was, here was the question. If you don't have to worry about people who are so traditional that they don't want to change, and you've got $2 billion, and you can create whatever you want to play with, what do you do, right? It's a fun question. And they chose as their provost one of my colleagues, one of my faculty members. And so he came to talk to me. He had been a head of one of our research centers and a biologist, really sweet guy, who was, of all things, really a descendant of Confucius. Can you believe it? It was really, really cool. And he was having all these conversations with me, so I got fascinated because he asked me, he said, what would you do? And we spent a lot of time. So he went, then one of my professors in biology went, she went, Madeline Wu, to be chair of biology. And so I was working with them, and so I would go over, and it was so cool because everybody they brought was incredible from this country, from England, from Canada, a lot of people, members of National Academies, and I kept watching the things they did, and they took the librarian from Caltech, and there were so many practices that were different from what I saw happening in this country at the time. Wonderful practices, including the use of technology in the library, including fewer individual buying of things at that time and more pooling funds, something that was not being done 20 years ago, in order to buy bigger pieces from the beginning and getting more people to work together. Med schools may have been doing it, but we weren't doing it. But it led to our doing things very differently earlier, and it led to much more. So we had the first, for example, we had the first 800 NMR in the country on our campus. Then that led to us having a 950 NMR. Amazingly, for our small campus, it really did. It was wonderful because of the things I saw at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. So it was great, it really was. Only thing I couldn't get was that escalator they have up in the mountains. Didn't have that kind of money, couldn't get that. But it was that. And the other thing I would say, my students inspire me. And some of the creativity. I was talking about one of my students who is MD, PhD at Duke now, Duke Med, who is working on a pacemaker in neuroengineering. I'm really fascinated by what he's doing, as an example. Mm-hmm. Yes? Anybody? Uh-huh.
I wondered if you could talk about priorities. I think some of us come to work every day or wake up every day, and we see huge streams of, I'm going to call them opportunities instead of problems, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
A lot of work needs to be done.
Yes.
And I'm sure you have experienced that yourself.
Yep.
And if you could talk a little bit about how you not only select your priorities,
right,
but also do so in a way that leaves you feeling ethically whole because you can't address every one of those opportunities that you see, and you recognize that some of them are just going to go unaddressed for the time being, which is going to be demoralizing to some people, but you get the drift.
I'm convinced that the most effective way to get things done is to have a multi-year, but then multi-month, then a multi-week approach to attacking problems, so that you decide over this next month, based on a multi-year approach, over this next month, this is what I'm going to work on, and in this next week, these are the things I'm doing, knowing that I'm going to have at least 25% of that time interrupted by emergencies, right? But so I've got a team of people, and we know I'm going to be spending this amount of time between travel doing these things. And so so even though you start every day and you're saying what you're going to do, but you already know 80% of it based on there's something about reflecting on the week, at least, based on having reflected on a longer period of time. The more time you take to reflect on what you plan to do over whatever the period is, the more you can really get done, because you know, this is what I know I'm going to complete. But giving yourself some time for emergencies. Yeah, I'm convinced. If you don't think about it in advance, then that's when you're just going in any kind of direction. You got to take that time to say, this is what I must get done. So even when the emergencies come, you're still going to know you're going back to that, whatever it is that's important. And the one thing I would say to everybody is take some time for you have to have some time for your health and those kinds of things. Very important. I would say, and Lord and I were talking about it, for me, as I think about diversity and inclusiveness, having a chance to listen to the voices of people different from me has always been very important. Whether it is, for different groups, whether it's my Latino students, and then with specificity. You can't just say, because Hispanic is not Hispanic, is not Hispanic. Black is not black, is not black. Asian is not that. I've got different subgroups within every group that I need to hear in different ways. You get my point? And I've come to appreciate that. I can't just lump folks together. I might have a group together, but I got to understand they have different perspectives, depending on where they grew up, what their background is. And I think even understanding that the upbringing of every student will make students different. We can't assume we know something about the student, or about the person, about the faculty member, about the staff member, just looking at them. You gotta hear that person's story. Once you hear the person's story, You have a better feel for it. Now that you know that your dean went to high school at Dunbar High, black folks will never look at him the same. He knows he had black classmates. I mean, it just makes a difference. He's got some sensitivity just based on that. You get my point? I mean, every experience you hear about any student gives you more perspective on that person. It just does, you know. And what I'm saying is we need to understand the need not to generalize about people in general. That when we talk about diversity and inclusiveness, it's for every group, any group. You know, I've had to, you know, let me give you an example. I've had to work with my white male students in some disciplines because in some disciplines on my campus, they're in a group by themselves and have had some challenges. You get that? And it's just an issue. And you have to give them support. So every group of human beings in different ways. But what's really challenging is helping people understand you want to respect them, support them, and help address their needs. That's the theme. Inclusive excellence means you make sure every group gets the support they need. But what my colleagues on my campus understand is we're still with the power in the hands heavily of white males. And my white males are secure enough to know this is not attacking them. You know, when I'm chairing the advanced group, we understood 10 years ago, literally only 12% of my STEM tenured faculty were women. We had kept saying, the guys kept saying, oh, there are plenty of women over here. Yeah, but they were not in tenure track positions. Today, it's because of the advanced program, we're up to 39%. Give my campus a half of that. It's a big deal. 39%. You see? But it took a lot of effort. It took creating a climate where we were not defensive and where we were working to make it better for everybody, you know. And we've now increased the numbers of students of color, people of color, faculty of color. It takes effort. I would say being proactive, not being defensive, being honest, transparent, coming up with specific best practices for every group. We've got an African-American group, a Hispanic group. We've looked at issues involving Asian students. For my Asian Americans of different types, we've got the faculty. We needed to work on having more Asian Americans in the administration. That was where we had an issue. You get my point? For every group, it may not be faculty, it may be administration. And for students, it's in STEM. You know, it's for issues of males, black males. It depends on the issue for each group. It's the specificity that makes the difference. I want you to hear this last quote, and I'll stop. It's one that I use all the time with my students. It says, and I'm going to get you to repeat it after because it's so significant. I'll say it, and I want you to remember it. Stand up. Everybody stand up, stand up, stand up. Get some energy. Here we go. I'm going to say it twice, and I want you to repeat it. Now, if you're not mindful, you will not learn it. If you are mindful, you will learn it because I'm going to give you a test on it. It says this. I'll say it first, and I'm going to have you repeat it twice, and then I'm going to give you the test. So I'm telling you in advance. Okay? It says, watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. It's just so true for every human being. So, okay, you're going to repeat after me twice, but be mindful because I'm going to test you to see if you've learned it. Got it? You are Stanford. You get A's. You got it? Here we go. Watch your thoughts, they become your words. Thoughts, words, actions, habits, character, destiny. One more time. Thoughts, words, actions, habits, character, destiny. Okay, here comes the test. You ready? Watch your thoughts, they become your. Watch your words, they become your. Watch your actions, they become your. Watch your habits, they become your. Watch your character, becomes your. Yeah, y'all Stanford. Thank you. Thank you. Excellent.
The preceding program is copyrighted by the Board of Trustees of the Leland Stanford Junior University. Please visit us at med.stanford.edu.